The guys are in there joking and laughing so much I can barely focus on the show. Stop it, guys. Stuff behind the scenes here is so crazy. All right, let me get my serious mindset on here. Here's what we're going to cover in the next 51 minutes with Webster Tarpley. The banking. U.S., UK moved closer to losing rating, Moody's says. Dr. Tarpley is an economist, also a doctorate of history. And I always enjoy his perspectives. Also, we're going to get into U.S. plans to fight the net revealed. Now, they've admitted this the last 2 years, that cybersecurity is taking over. The Pentagon is taking over the infrastructure. They're going to restrict. They're going to hire provocateurs, Cass Sunstein, tax conspiracy theories, i.e. questioning government, anthropogenic global warming. Everything is to be illegal. Just incredible things happening. Open talk of more war with Iran. News reports of more U.S. forces moving into Diego Garcia and other areas. And then separately, this article, is China's Politburo spoiling for a showdown with America? This is the London Telegraph today. In fact, can I have a document cam shot of this, boys, for the PrisonPlanet.tv viewers? The long simmering clash between the world's two great powers is coming to a head with dangerous implications. And I want to cover this first with Tarpley before the internet stuff, because it all ties together. Because all these governments are getting themselves ready for war, economic, you name it. Is China's Politburo spoiling for a showdown with America? Of course, Tarpley will say, no, it's the West trying to encircle China. They're all a bunch of thugs, government scum run. But the point is, there's no doubt that this is happening. The long simmering clash between the world's two great powers is coming to a head with dangerous implications for the international system. Now, the last 6 months, this has been simmering. We've been talking about it with our expert guest, all agreeing that there's major battle lines, that the Iran situation in Pakistan is just set pieces into China. Now, listen to this article. China has succumbed to hubris. It has mistaken the soft diplomacy of Barack Obama for weakness, mistaken the U.S. credit crisis for decline, and mistaken its own mercantilist bubble for ascendancy. Oh, they admit it's mercantilism, how we've been deindustrialized. It was our big banking cartels that set the deal up. Mercantilism, by design, not free trade, to ruin all their competition. There are, I've never seen such an honest article by Ambrose Evans Pritchard, but it's not honest. It's twisted to say that it's all China, but the information is somewhat accurate. It has mistaken the soft diplomacy of Barack Obama for weakness, mistaken the U.S. credit crisis for decline, and mistaken its own mercantilist bubble for ascendancy. There are echoes of the Anglo-German spats before the First World War, when Wilhelm Berlin so badly misjudged the strategic balance of power and overplayed its hand. It's going to be really hard for them, yet again, to fudge on the obvious fact that China is manipulating without a credible threat. We're not going to get anywhere, said Paul Krugman, this year's Nobel economist. And then it continues. China's premier Wen Jiabao, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, is defiant. I don't think the yuan is undervalued. We oppose countries pointing fingers at each other and even forcing a country to appreciate its currency, he said yesterday. Once again, he demanded the U.S. takes concrete steps to reverse and reassure investors over the safety of U.S. assets. And then it goes on with them saying, we're a police state. How dare you say we're a police state in China? And we've got Venezuela calling for internet controls. That's wrong. But our government's actually putting it in place. And the article goes on and on. It's a very chilling story. But it's not just China saying the banks are looting us. It's Bloomberg and Moody's saying we basically have already really lost our AAA rating, but it's still officially there. So to talk about the geopolitical state of the world, what we're steaming into, echoes of World War I, World War II, all the pieces lining up, the domestic police state clamping down ahead of the war. What type of war is this? Economic, military, a mix? Webster, I mean, this is an amazing story from the London Telegraph.
Well, Ambrose Evans Pritchard, of course, is the voice of MI6 and British intelligence. And that newspaper, that rag over there, the London Daily Telegraph, were, of course, pro-Hitler all through the 1930s. They stuck with Hitler as long as they dared. So it's good that you remembered this or recall this question about the British rivalry with Germany before 1914, when the British saw a rising industrial challenger, and of course their response to it was to attempt to play Russia and France against Germany, and the result of that is World War I, and the British found themselves dragged into it. Now, the current situation of Britain is that they are bankrupt 6 ways to Sunday. They are more bankrupt than Greece. One of the reasons for attacking Greece is to relieve pressure not just on the dollar, but also on the British pound and the city of London in general.
And the metrics all show that. They are much more debt per capita, per citizen, and the government than Greece.
And the rate of growth of British debt is also quicker. So we're dealing now with the British establishment. So their response to this kind of a crisis is to attempt to create tensions between Russia and the United States, but also, as you see, to attempt to get in between the United States and China and attempt to make that into a crisis. Because the British right now are so desperate, and I'm referring now to the ruling elite, because there are other forces that I'd like to refer to, but they're so desperate that they feel the only way they can hang on is by the simultaneous ruin of all the other contenders. And everybody needs to know this, right? The instinct of the British Foreign Office is divide and conquer, provoke conflicts, get everybody else at each other's throats, right? The BBC, bed, breakfast, and conflict. They deal in conflict, and here they're trying to do it. Now, the idea that there's a group in the Chinese Politburo that wants conflict is absolutely fantastic. These people are meek bureaucrats, relatively speaking, who are attempting to avoid conflict, and right now, that group of bureaucrats in the Politburo is paying the price for their bad decisions of the last 20 years, essentially opening up to free trade to a significant degree, although they've tried to use other people's free trade rather than their own. Let's say their big crime is to pay lip service to free trade, and above all, building up this huge amount of dollar assets, which are now a significant threat to them. If they keep them, they will dwindle. If they dump them, they will all crash. I've recommended that China start using that money for capital investments inside the country.
Well, that's what they're doing. But let me stop you, Webster, before we digress off into economics and what you think China should do. What is the larger, from your perspective, program? Why did the West invest almost everything in China, build them up, and then now double back and attack China for all the power they've got, when the CFR and others have said this century is the Chinese century? I mean, we know the British great game is to play powers off against each other, and we know that they control a lot of our policy here and that we're joined at the hip with the Anglo-American Dutch system. But, I mean, pulling away before we go off into light pebble reactors and monorail, and I mean, that's all.
Right, which is where they should go and where we should, too.
Well, that's where they're going, and we're not. But the point here is the larger picture. What was the method in the madness of moving the industrial base to China and now running around like chickens with their heads cut off about it?
Yeah,